The book of Job, uh, verse 26. Yet when I hoped for good, evil came. When I looked for light, then came darkness. This video, it's going to be a stronger focus on the franchise series known as Warhammer. I think it's also called 40K. So I don't know. It's kind of probably going to be a jumbled mess of a bunch of stuff. It's going to be a more of like a, I guess I've been calling it the Christian perspective, and I am trying to lean more to becoming more of like a Republican, but we'll see what happens. I kind of call it a Christian conservative perspective. We'll see what happens. It's probably going to be more of like a neutral review, or just some bunch of rambling or opinions on the stuff with the faith link to it. But there's an article called Faith, Fiction, and Fatherhood Dealing in Dreams, Christianity and Warhammer 40K. Let's see here. Fantasy, fiction, and Christianity in general. So when I read these, I might just take a couple points here and there. I haven't really like read the whole article or anything either, but we'll see what happens. Like, this kind of gives me a little bit of a structure, so that I just have something that I go off of and a little bit of a focus. But we'll see what happens. No, I'm not going to diatribe about magic and demons and the like anathema to Christians. If you think I was, you have not been paying attention to my writing, or this is your first post of mine to read. If it's the latter, welcome and thanks for taking the time. To those who say that Christianity means we can't or shouldn't enjoy Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Harry Dresden, or any other fiction that deals with the supernatural in any form, my response is the following. Put on your big boy or big girl pants, grow up, and understand that fiction doesn't necessarily endorse any of those things. Realize that you don't have to agree with everything in a fictional setting to enjoy it, or, as important, be caused to think about some idea in new and different ways. That kind of intellectual challenge is healthy and good. If you're worried about the make-believe and imaginary shattering your faith, or diverting you from the one true path, I question the composition, sincerity, and depth of that faith. I suggest you read Milton's Areopagita. Too long, didn't read. Being a Christian should not prevent you from playing games in or enjoying the Warhammer 40K universe, or other fantasy fiction for that matter. Okay, so confessions. Okay, that aside, let me confess to you, sometimes the 40K universe raises within me some issues that make me consider abandoning the setting, despite all the things I love about it. Here's the crux of it. 40K confronts me with the question of whether I need the settings I enjoy to be compatible with, or at least not entirely counter to my theological beliefs. Okay, so this person talks about like D&D. It says here, I have several potential responses to myself about this feeling. Suck it up, Buttercup. Um, Respects all religions. Okay. So I guess with this here, I personally think it's good to listen to other people's opinions, because you don't always just want to hear yourself. I think this person speaks the truth, and I do like what this person says, but there is a level of truth that you can speak about reality and still be loving at the same time. It's stuff like, suck it up, Buttercup, just get over it or whatever. I think that's very insensitive It's just like an unloving thing to say. But we should speak the truth. But but be loving too. Okay, so here's just some pictures. So it's something interesting, maybe pretty to look at. We'll see here. Okay, so I'm gonna be honest. That I'm not that familiar with the Warhammer franchise. I know a little bit about it, but not a lot. So this will probably just be some uh, kind of just general takes and opinions, or just some advice maybe to do. So it's supposed to be set 40,000 plus years into the future from our current Earth, and there's like some evil, quote unquote, false like deity or god. He's called like the Emperor or something. Kind of like in Star Wars, how they have the like an eternal Emperor also. He's like the big bad villain. He kind of represents the Antichrist. Like, he forces everybody to worship him, and so I guess let's see here. The game setting, or just the world setting, it's pretty dark. It's also pretty military heavy. It's it's set in a science fiction kind of a world too. It has um it has multiple, I guess, like in quotations, like religions. Um, let's see here. So they have some fictional and some fantasy themes, like the different races and stuff. They have like, I think like in this picture here, it shows some. I think they're goblins or they're orcs. So I, as a person of the faith, personally don't really think there's anything wrong with that kind of stuff. I think that stuff's actually pretty cool. But and there is some kind of magic that exists within this world. I generally, as a person of the faith, sorcery is satanic, so you should stay away from that stuff. You should, in real life, never bow down to a false deity or someone who makes you worship them as a deity or a god. That's blasphemy. Um, I'm not sure if Christianity is ever really like mentioned per se in the series directly, but there it is set within our world, so technically it does exist within it. Um, it's more like a fictionalized series. It's also it's very dark and it's very brutal and it has some horror elements to it. It's generally just a very ruthless world, but I think you could find value from it at the same time. Let's see here. I've just been considering on a more of a neutral point of view. It's called Warhammer Rogue Trader. So let's see here. Let's just read kind of some of the stuff it says. It's supposed to be like a story rich. Your choices matter. It's a CRPG game. Um, I watched a couple of reviews on it. I mean, there's obviously some stuff you need to be careful about, but it does kind of look like a cool game. I like games where you can make moral choices. It has some cool looking combat. It and there should be like a PlayStation 5 version out there. This is like a little mini video about it, but obviously there's a lot of. It's very dark. You can kind of see it. It's just a very it's a very like a brutal kind of world and society. But let's just see here. Uh, so like the idea is, I think that like you're supposed to be. You're called the Rogue Trader. Obviously, it's the name of the game. You're like supposed to be like super rich, and you have the power. You have you have the special authority and power to make choices in the world. You can pretty much do almost whatever you want and whatever is needed to accomplish the will of like a certain group. And so yeah, there's a bunch of companions in the game. Uh, it's like a turn-based style combat. Let's just see here. Let's just read this. Universe Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, set in the Cornus Expanse, a little charted and perilous region of space. The backwater sector is rife with opportunities for explorers and adventurers alike. As a rogue trader, you will traverse incredible distances in your giant void ship as you chart this cluster of planets. There's like the treacherous void. Yeah, so it sets in the 41st millennium. There's like a political power structure. I guess also Henry Cavill is supposedly is gonna be he's probably gonna be getting his own TV show about it, or a movie, or some kind of piece of entertainment content, maybe within the next couple of years or so, or it'll be announced heavier. He's a pretty cool dude. Played Superman and Geralt of Rivia and The Witcher. And he generally likes the fan base. That's something that I think is very cool. Uh, they have a pretty solid core fan base. I personally think that the people who play the figures miniatures, they're kind of elitist sometimes. It's a very expensive game, but they can be kind of cruel at the same time. It's just something to be careful of, because they spend lots of money, but they also think they're really important. And like the fan base is also very, maybe like protective. And you know, sometimes you can become like it's like in the Pharisees in the Bible, you become very self-righteous and very hypocritical. Because here's some kind of a video. Uh, yeah, it's kind of all set based around this one big individual. Supposedly, he like every single day he like takes like 20,000 people's lives or souls and just consumes them to keep himself alive another day. So he continuously forces trillions of people to have to bow to his tyranny. It's yeah, it's very dark. It's very military based. It's also in a lot of ways. It's also pretty cool. Like this is a pretty nice looking trailer. But there's a lot of reasons to be careful about it too. I feel like, but it's a science fiction. Um, I like the idea of just going through the worlds and just fighting stuff or whatever, just collecting loot. It's kind of dark and has some horror elements to it, and it has some manipulations of energy. It has some like wizards and stuff. As a person of the faith, you definitely got to be careful about that kind of stuff. But I think there's a lot of potential value that could be gained from it too. It has you could be honorable, like even in this little picture here, it shows some people praying. Obviously, they're not praying, you know, to God Himself, through His Son, Spirit, and holiness. They have many false religions, but arguably in their worlds, they're forced to do it too at the same time. So you don't really, in a lot of ways, you don't really have any other choice because these evil warlords and stuff, they basically just enslave their people. They treat their people badly, and that's pretty morally evil. And as a Christians, we should try to treat people better than worse. People should be free on at least on some levels. We should seek to worship God. We should never force people to believe in our beliefs. It's like they send out huge armies and they just slaughter people. It's all for their own self interest. But yeah, it has some similarities to the Fallout universe at times with like the big mechs and the power armor. It kind of has some similarities to Star Wars a little bit. You can see some obvious Star Wars similarities. Which is the whole they both have a big emperor that is just a big giant evil dick, I guess you could call him. They have there's it has some similarities at times to Wasteland, maybe with like the big creatures or mechanized creatures. It has it's a game based around like politics and power struggles. And they have their own versions of like quote unquote religions. There's supposed to be like trillions of people in this world, and there's a lot of chaos and a lot of evil, a lot of rebellion, and it being a science fiction kind of world, it it kind of puts you in the situation where you got to ask yourself like what if, because a lot of this, it kind of in ways it is like about what if 40,000 years took place. What if God's revelation came, or what if God just left everybody, all the wicked here for thousands of years, and just forced them to, like this? Maybe this is their hell that they have to live in, and they're forced to continuously, stay in this state. With the Christian faith, we get raptured up to heaven, and God just abandons the wicked here until the end of time. There's lots of what ifs, right? Uh, and there's a lot of cool looking like pictures and different scenes. It's definitely something that it's very intriguing. Here's the thing where it says, "Is Christianity a thing in Warhammer 40k?" It says, "No and no. It was methodically and deliberately stomped out by the Emperor. There was one exception. One of the Emperor's fellow perpetuals, but he's dead too." So again, like it kind of shows that like it's kind of set in a like Revelation style, whereas like the Emperor probably represents Satan. He's like the Antichrist of the universe. It's just a really big evil dick. That's probably the best, nicest way to say it. I guess, excuse the language or whatever. Let's just take a look here. That's the one I thought before. But yeah, like it shows that there was Christianity at one point in this world. Um, but there's also um there was also, let's see here. I think I've watched this video. Let's see here. Let's just see what happens.
I made a joke once in a YouTube short about how the Emperor's sense of humor revolves around irony, and a lot of people pointed out that he must find it hilarious that he is now the subject of the galaxy's biggest irony. That being the ultimate turbo atheist is now the head of his own religion.
Will you please? Okay, so obviously there's fair use. You're allowed to use other people's content to some extent. You're not supposed to just like blatantly steal people's content. But you can use people's footage, so this is fair use warning. Most people are cool though. Some people aren't, but I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But let's see here. Here's a person's video where they kind of talk about. Let's just take a look.
Think of the Word-Bearers Legion, and more specifically, their Primarch Lorgar Aurelian. But it does extend back further. You see, Lorgar himself had begun to believe the Emperor was a god before he even met him. He started having dreams and visions back on his planet of Colchis of a one true god, one singular deity who would replace the polytheistic pantheon, which was actually chaos worship, that was in vogue on cultists at the time. And despite finds me challenge.
Okay, so here's one aspect then also of like this being like quote unquote the emperor, like basically the Antichrist. Um, he's also just a massive hypocrite. So he starts out as an atheist, right? And he denies their like pagan cult or their pagan pantheon. He probably hates the Christian faith. And he hates the Christian God, the Abrahamic biblical God. So he instead tries to make himself into his own deity. I mean, there's a lot of levels of where he denies actual Christian faith and the Jewish faith, which later becomes the Christian faith, and he's an atheist. So it's like he's just like there's a lot of um, he's basically just a massive moral hypocrite in a lot of ways. Just like honestly, I feel like a lot of ways, a lot of people who are like hardcore anti-theists, not to make people mad or anything, but they're pretty hypocritical. You deny faith, but then like you demand your own, but you gotta make your own faith instead, and you put that in its place. You gotta destroy the Christian faith and destroy all the other religions, and then prop yourself up into that place instead. Make yourself your own like quote unquote God. I mean, it does a lot of ways sound like the Antichrist. You tear down everybody else's religions and put yourself into that place instead. You know, it's just like the foundation of the big bad enemy. He's just no, he's just a giant like he's just a bad hypocrite. Let's just see where else I can.
If you rule an entire galactic empire, but you're just some guy, especially a guy with no claim to divine right to rule like other emperors would have throughout history, you're going to be challenged. Other people will see you and think, yeah, I could do that. But when you look and present as the emperor did, this golden, immaculate entity that is so mind-bogglingly beyond human, they're not going to think, yeah, I could do that, I could be him. They will be willing to bend the knee very easily. It's said in the books that the emperor presented himself in this immaculate golden warrior king way to his sons because that's what they would follow and that's what they would be receptive to. But that also applies to the bulk of humanity as well. If you're going to present yourself as the guy about to lead the entire galaxy, you need to look the part. Now, the problem with this is, as we all know, how would people not think he's God? Just fucking look at the guy. Just take 2 seconds to even look at him if you can, because he apparently is physically painful to look at. And you'll see why people are going to start worshipping him, and he should have known that. But he thought he could curtail it with suppression of faith, through edicts, and through just general denial of divinity. For some reason...
Okay, yeah, so if you read the Bible, when the Lord Jesus Christ, God himself incarnate, came to this earth, you don't think of yourself. A lot of people really they question his divinity because he didn't make himself look like what you would presume in like the Old Testament, the God the Father looks like. He came to this earth as the Son. He was just a simple, humble, meek man. He wore white robes and some kind of like undergarments and sandals. And a handful of times he interacted with some stuff. But that's about all he had. Sometimes he had like a stick that he used for something. Like he drew some stuff in the ground. He had a gold coin in his hand that he used as an example. He didn't really have anything. And he was just a humble, simple, lowly, meek man. And that's what he presented himself as. Now, you look at the deity of Christ, his divinity, and you look at like what this being here. You saw like the pictures of that guy. No, this guy basically represents the Antichrist. He wants you to worship him based upon earthly things. He's like what? I don't really know. I don't know too much about the lore. I think he's like tries to make himself look like he's like 20 feet tall. Sits on some massive throne. He has just giant, heavy armor. He does everything he can do. He wants to look nice. He forces people to worship him. People want to worship him. The false so-called God. because of all these earthly things. But because he has to try to pretend to be something that he's actually not. He's not a deity. He's just a man. He uses satanic powers, or uses magic, or some some perversion to keep himself alive. He has to manipulate the world on some false pretense. Because he basically represents the Antichrist. So I think this is also a thing where if you're a Christian and you want to play this game or you want to see the series, this is definitely a foundation. Like the you know realize that this religion is honestly you're fighting against an enemy who's basically the devil of Revelation. And then there's also the video game series called Shin Megami Tensei. Or I can't pronounce. I probably can't pronounce it. Shin Megami Tensei something. Uh, they kind of take the idea of Revelation. Now, I haven't actually played that series myself, so I can't tell you too much about it. But supposedly the end boss is the Abrahamic God. But you're basically set in like it's similar to this world, where we're kind of like where God kind of just pulls himself away from humanity and just lets people just be evil in a sense. Honestly, this is man-made creation, but it reflects a world that's like an atheist world. This is the kind of world that, if you're an atheist, this is the world you would want. If God wasn't in your world or he pulled himself back, this is what the world would look like. Because evil would reign intensely. And if you're a Christian, realize that the enemy of the game, well, the enemy of the game is basically the devil. And if you're in that world, you're probably just like a slave to some dark powers and forced into some false religion. You also don't know any better. Okay, so all right, so I might make this into a series. I might talk about this game another time. Well, I'm probably not gonna make this too much longer. Well, this is some basic foundations of the world. So honestly, just try to avoid the magic and try to avoid the false deities. But just acknowledge God and have hope. Seek the light. All right. Thank you. God is good.